This is the next video in our series on quadratic equations. Quadratic equation is an equation that has the squared, an exponent of 2 for the variable. That's the biggest exponent in the equation. An equation is a string of numbers and letters that has an equal sign. It makes it an equation. Something is equal to something. And a quadratic equation has an exponent of 2, the biggest exponent for a variable. A coefficient is the number out in front of the variable. So let's have a look at an equation. This equation here is quadratic. The biggest exponent is a 2, x squared. And these numbers out in front of the variables, the 3 in front of x squared and the 6 in front of the x, those are the coefficients. This last number out here in the back is a constant. It has no variable attached to it. And notice we have the equal sign and then a 0. What we're going to use on this equation is the quadratic formula. And we're going to try to find out, to solve for x, meaning to find out exactly what is x. Looking at this string of numbers and variables, can we identify what is x? Is it 3? Is it 7? What is x equal to? So the quadratic formula requires that your first step is to put the equation into order like this, where the highest exponent comes first, in the middle, the variable with no exponent, and at the end, we add or subtract the constant. Then you have an equal sign, and on the other side, we want a 0. When we put it into this format, we can then use the quadratic formula to find out what exactly is x, what number is it equal to. Okay, so once you get it in order, we're able to assign to each one of these numbers the coefficient 3 is a. So we call a 3, right? Because it was the thing out front. B is 6 and C is 0 because they're in the places that we assign them to, and these are the letters we give them. Okay, the reason we want to give them each a letter is because we're going to use the quadratic formula, which is a plug-and-play formula. You place the number in the spot it's supposed to go into. So this number out front of the formula, the b, because the equation we're trying to solve has a 6 here in the middle, we're going to use, for b, we're going to use 6. So where we see a b, we're going to put a 6. So let's look at how that would look out. Here we have, instead of negative b at the beginning, we have negative 6. Why do we have negative 6 at the beginning? Because in this particular equation that we're trying to solve and find out what x is, the b is a 6. So 6 goes here. 6 also goes right there, right? Because that's where the b's go. And the last two, in this position here, whatever a is, you put the number that a is right there, right? Because we're following this formula. It's a plug-and-play formula. We know where to plug in the numbers. So you can memorize what the formula looks like or have it in front of you, and you just place the number where it's supposed to go. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is just calculate, using addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. We're going to calculate what is x equal to. Because notice on this side of the equal sign, all you have is numbers. So once we put all these numbers together by arithmetic, we'll find out the number that x is equal to. Okay, so 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 4 is 24. And 6 squared, 6 times 6 is 36. So in this, inside the square root, we get a 36 take away 24. So what is 36 take away 24? Well, 12. So inside the square root, you're going to get a 12. On the bottom here, it's a fraction, right? 2 times 3 gives you 6. So you have 6 on the bottom. We end up with a negative 1 out front because we're able, with fractions, to separate this into two problems. We have 6 over 6, and this thing here, which becomes square root of 12 over 6. This is in fact just a number. This is the end of the problem. We've solved the problem. It's not a very pleasant solution because it has a square root in it, and it's very difficult to identify exactly what is that number. Is it minus 2? Is it minus 1? Is it somewhere around 0.5? where is this on the number line? But if we put this into a calculator, it would tell us exactly, specifically, what fraction this would be. It'd be something with a long decimal point on it. All right, notice that in the quadratic formula here, this term, this symbol right here is a positive. The quadratic formula has two different forms. This is the one with the positive right there. There's another answer, two answers. X is equal to this number here, but X is also equal to a different number, another number, two answers. The second answer, instead of putting a plus right here, you use the same quadratic formula, but instead of putting a plus right here, we're going to put a minus right there. So let's look at what that looks like. So everything is exactly the same. This is the other answer the quadratic formula gives you. Everything's the same here. Here's your original equation. We're identifying 3 with A, 6 with B, and 2 with C. And we're going to use quadratic formula again, only this time the second version of the quadratic formula has a minus right there. Everything else is exactly identical, except this time with a minus. So we plug in our numbers, plug and play formula. 6 goes here because B is 6. So wherever you see a B in the quadratic formula, we're going to place a 6 in the equation. Again, this ends up 36 minus 24. And just like before, 36 minus 24 is square root of 12. So the only difference between this second answer, and this is a second answer because this is a different number. -1 minus square root of 2 over 6 is not the same number as -1 plus square root of 12 over 6. So we end up with two different answers, one with a plus here and one with a minus here. So looking at the two of them together, the quadratic formula has two answers. One answer, x equals to this number here, plugging in each number where the letter goes, and a plus sign right there. And the second answer, x equals to, again, the quadratic formula, the second version with a minus right there. So looking at the numbers plugged in, the plus and the minus, plus gives you one answer, and plugging in the exact same numbers with a minus right there gives you your other answer. This answer has a plus, this answer has a minus. So there's two different values of x that solves this equation. That is, if we was to take this number, which is some decimal out to the infinite number of decimals, if you took this long number and you stuck it in where x was, in this equation, it would give you 0. And the same thing if you put this in, plugged this number here in for x, it would give you 0. So these are the two answers that result in 0, and that's called the quadratic formula. It's a system of solving a quadratic equation just by plugging in numbers into the positions where they're supposed to go, and it comes up with an answer. The symbol they usually use for shorthand is the plus and minus symbol, because it's the exact same formula, but it's either this -b plus square root of these variables, or it's -b minus the square root of these variables. So the two different versions, and they show it with just one for shorthand, make it shorter, they show it with just one equation, and it has a plus and minus right here. And up here, it reminds you where does the A and B and C come from. All right, let's look at a classwork. Try to do quadratic formula for this equation right here. Plug in A, B, and C into the quadratic formula and come up with your two answers for x. You may need to go back and rewatch example 1 to remember where the numbers go, and you probably need to be having the quadratic formula written down in front of you until you finally memorized it, and then you'll be able to plug the numbers in where they're supposed to be. Pause the video, try out this problem, see if you can get an answer, 2 answers. And all right, let's have a look at the answer I got and compare it to the answer you got, and we'll see what you got. Okay, A I said was 3, that's the number out front. B is 7, that's the number here in the middle. And C was 2. It's equal to 0, so it's in the right format here to be pulling those numbers out. Okay, I plugged those numbers into this formula, the quadratic formula, with the plus or minus right there, because there's 2 different versions of the formula, the one with the plus and the one with the minus. That'll give us our 2 answers. Okay, putting in the numbers, 4 times 3 times 2, it's 24 again. 7 squared is 49. 49, take away 24, gives us 25. Square root of 25 is 5. 5 times 5 is 25. So you end up with 7, a negative 7, plus or minus 5. So negative 7 plus 5 gives you 2 over 6, and that reduces to 1 over 3. Negative 1 over 3. And our other answer, x is negative 2. So the 2 different answers, x is either negative 1/3 or x is negative 2. If you put in either one of these answers into this equation for x, you evaluate this equation at negative 2, it would give you back 0. So 0 solves this equation. Negative 2 for x solves the equation to 0. And this website right here, you see at the bottom, is where I generated this answer right here. It's a very nice website for using the quadratic formula to solve the quadratic equation. You just type in the quadratic equation into this website, and it spits out all of this work here, all done for you. It's a plug-and-play formula. So it's the exact same thing if you, by hand, plugged in the numbers, did a little arithmetic, and you come up with the 2 answers. All right, let's try another example. Looks just like the one we just did. It's classwork number 2. Plug in your numbers, A, B, and C, into the quadratic formula, and see if you get an answer. Pause the video, and then we'll look at the answer I got and see if we get the same thing. Okay, let's look at what I got and compare it to what you got. Pause the video, take a look at the answer here, see if it came out the same for you as it did for me. And again, I used this website right here, typed in that equation, and it produced all of this work for me. All right, thank you for watching the video.